Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we have Innovia Consulting's John Grant, who will be giving us an overview on NAV Reordering Policies. And we ask that if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the questions box and we will get them called out during the webinar. And we do record all of our webinars, so this will be available later this week on our website for you to watch again or share with any of your colleagues and friends. So now I will turn it over to John, and he will begin our presentation.
Okay, we're going to get into what the overview is. We're going to focus on reorder policies, if time allows, a little bit on NAV's planning worksheets. There's two different ones, but technically, depending on your license, if you're running assembly orders only, we'll go through that. And then some advanced features for the planner. If I'm the planner, how do I, like, why is it telling me to do something? Some tips on that. So that's the quick overview. So let's have at it. Okay, so reorder policies. NAV has 5 reorder policies, and these are used to have the planning engine determine and make recommendations. The recommendations go into a worksheet. It doesn't automatically create purchase orders, production orders, or assembly orders. It allows the planner to review them, potentially change, modify, ignore. I could run planning tonight, come in the morning, and choose to not carry out anything. So it gives the planner complete control. How you run your production and whatnot is separate. We're not going to get into that, but as a planner, I would be able to typically the first people in the planning system are the production and assembly planners. And there's the ability to create production orders and assembly orders out of the planning worksheets. And then from there, depending on your process, you may have to, there's something called a net change to basically square up the purchase demand that was generated at the same time as the production and assembly orders. But back to reorder policies, we have 5 different ones. These are stored on each item or SKU card. If you're running stock keeping units, kind of an interesting name in NAV, but stock keeping units are by location. And there are 5, and we're going to go through each one of these in detail. And like I said, any question is fair game. So the choices are, we're going to go blank. Blank is legitimate for some items. You may have a purchased item that you buy twice a year from overseas, and that's how you control it. You don't really need planning to give you any recommendations. You kind of keep that offline. If you would want to keep some of those, just a tip on those long lead time items, NAV has ability to do a component forecast. So I could put those long lead time items in a component forecast, and when I run planning for purchased items, normally maybe I'm running it out 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever your company process is. But then as the purchasing planner, I might run it out. I'm going to run it out 6 months to see if there's any forecast items that might impact my need to order it because I've got a 4-month lead time, for example. So hopefully that helps you with the super long lead times for purchasing, how companies are handling them. I personally like the forecast. At least you have some visibility in your planning worksheet that it pops up if I run it out that far. But again, sometimes those are tough to put into the system formally. But forecasting does work for those. So blank is the first choice that you might do. Not used a lot, but it does have its place. Okay, and another reorder policy I see, which is used quite often, is fixed reorder quantity. Again, I'm going to qualify this type of reorder policy. So, and I'll show you this, just a little blurb on it. It uses the reorder quantity field as like a standard lot size that you reorder. And then there is it's used for calculating the overflow level, and I will touch on that. So we're talking about fixed reorder quantity. And here is a quick view of a field called Overflow Level, which is used by fixed reorder quantity and maximum, I believe. Think of this as I only have so much space to store items, and therefore I might want to set up an overflow level that I don't ever want to bring in more than that, because now I got a problem. It'll still recommend it, but you'll get a message in the planning worksheet. So just be aware, this is a new feature that came up in maybe NAV 2015-16 on the manufacturing setup tab that I'm showing here. And it's just called overflow level. And you have two options. Allow the default, which is the reorder point plus the reorder quantity as the maximum, or use the item value. And I usually recommend setting that to use the item. And then if you don't use that field, just leave it blank, because you don't want the planning worksheet to be telling you not to order something, or getting this message that you're in overflow level situation. Kind of a hidden setup. It was new in 2016, 2015, and it causes some of those, if for those of you running the planning worksheet or requisition worksheet, some of those fun messages that you're kind of scratching your head. Why is it telling me to do that? So we'll go on from there. Back to the fixed reorder quantity. So these are the fields when you assign an item a fixed reorder policy, whether it's a stock keeping unit or an item. Fields will gray out that are not valid, it doesn't use, but the other fields will allow you to enter. And fixed reorder quantity is based on a reorder point. Early versions of NAV, it had to be less than this reorder point. So if you're running, I don't know, 2013 or earlier, I think that was the case. It had to be less than 200 in my example here. But the newer versions, 15 and onward, it's equal to or less than. So in an upgrade, when you upgrade, just keep that in mind. We have had to subtract 1 from that reorder point for some customers, just because they had to kind of fine tune to what they were using and whatnot. This fixed reorder quantity, include inventory, is not an option. It always looks at inventory. All it's really doing is it's going out and based on purchase orders, production orders, assembly orders, sales orders, forecasts, it's determining if you're falling equal to or less than 200 on a certain date. And if you are, it is then going to recommend a reorder for what your reorder quantity is. In this case, we reorder 1,000 at a time, but it could be less than that. Typically, this reorder quantity is equal to or greater than your reorder point. And you have modifiers that you could use. Maybe there's an order multiple, maybe it's a truck load, maybe it's a pallet load, maybe something that makes sense to have an order multiple. Maximum order quantity may come into play, possibly if you have I've seen this in the liquid, like you have a vessel that you store, I don't know, 50,000 gallons of a liquid. I cannot store more than that, so I may use that. And any one load is a truck load, 50,000 gallons, something like that. And then a minimum order quantity. Typically, though, this reorder quantity, the minimum doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't really make sense. If you have a reorder quantity, it's usually a number that brings you up to or greater than the reorder point, so the next night it doesn't run again. For instance, if I had this as 10, the reorder quantity, planning would run. If I fell below, let's say I got down to 150, it would say order 10. Well, guess what? The next night I'm up to 160. Now I got to order 10 more. Those kind of things would mess up your order point. But fixed reorder quantity, I usually recommend is fine, and I think it's for your C items, low cost. If you have a lot of inventory on hand of it, it's not a big deal. If it's the A and B items, you may not want to use fixed reorder because it tends to build inventory because you're ordering extra all the time. And if it is an expensive item, an A or a B type item, you may not want to do that. And there's better reorder policies for that. So anybody got any questions on fixed reorder? I do see that out there, but mostly on C-level type items. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Okay, maximum reorder quantity. So there's a field called maximum inventory, and it uses the, that's the quantity you're always going to be adjusted back up to. And then there's this overflow level that we talked about before. Let's take a look at the records when I select maximum quantity. So my reorder policy is now maximum quantity. Again, grayed out areas, I cannot put data in. It has a reorder point and it has a maximum. These two fields are key. So if I get down to where I'm either the on hand would fall to 100 or below 100, it's going to recommend a reorder, and this is a purchase item. It'll recommend the difference up to 300. So if in my planning worksheet at some point I get down to 75, it will trigger a purchase order to order 225. So maximum can be used, I guess this is the one that's used on vessels, but I also have had good success with this using it for subcontractors, where you are responsible for their inventory. They're putting together something for you or assembling something or doing, they've got some of your components that you own until they use. And to maintain an inventory over there, as a purchasing agent, I might set all the, let's say they have a dozen items of mine that they assemble. I would set those up as maximum, and then I would maintain this number at their location. I'd have a stock keeping unit card with that location, and I would set up the maximum inventory and manage that as the planner. So that when I ran planning for that location, it's always going to want to replenish when it hits the reorder point up to my maximum. And then I manage this maximum. These numbers are static, so there is not a button in NAV to hit that would say recalculate minimum, maximum, reorder points. There is not something like that in NAV. If you have a very volatile type of reordering, I would recommend rapid start and possibly quarterly, or well, probably minimum quarterly. You would be exporting the planning fields for the item and making adjustments, then importing them in, because you might be, you might have a safety stock, you might change the reorder point. If this is a seasonal item, possibly after the first of the year, I don't want to have much on inventory. So again, static data. There's not a program that recalculates this if you have that question. Maximum inventory. Any questions on that one? Like I said, the best example I see for this is either a vessel that you fill with a liquid at your site and you can only have so much, or managing your subcontractor inventory that you own and they consume as they assemble something for you. Okay, we're good with that. So let me just catch up on my notes here so I'm on the same page with you guys. Okay, we're going to charge on to the next reorder policy. So NAV has a lot for lot reorder policy, and no pun intended, but a lot of customers use this. I see this mostly on the production side, where I only order it when I need it. I don't really maintain much inventory. I might have some, but it's called lot for lot. And let's take a look at the card. So again, reorder policy is lot for lot. If you notice reorder point parameters, there is no reorder points. There is nothing that triggers if I, the only thing I might, if you have a safety stock, but let's not get into that. That's what reorder point is not there. But here's where the fields are used. This lot for lot, whoops, let me go back here. Go back one. The lot for lot includes inventory or not. This is the only reorder policy where you can include inventory or not. I have not had a good use for not including inventory, so I'm not sure why you would unmark that, but it allows you to unmark it if you have items that maybe you build every time. You don't, if you happen to have inventory, you still build it, then you would unmark that, include inventory and keep it at lot for lot. So in planning runs with lot for lot, and let's say I have a sales order for a either an assembly or a production order item that's due on, I don't know, let's say April 2nd or something. It then looks in the system out 7 days further to say, is there any more orders out there, or any independent demand, as they call it, in the system for additional quantities, and planning will combine those onto one recommendation for production order, in this example. So you are telling the planning worksheet how to combine orders in that case. This could be 14 days, but 7 days looks out for the week. Is there any other orders? Pull them together. And the due date of the second order, let's say the first order was due on April 2nd, and the second order was due on April 8th. Both would be due on April 2nd, and production would one run for the total. So again, lot for lot. Let's see if I got some highlights on lot for lot that we could share with you. So it considers each demand within the reorder cycle, and as you see, my 7 days is the reorder cycle. And that's probably the biggest advantage to combine orders. I don't want separate production orders or purchase orders. If I have a demand, pull them together. Where fixed reorder is ordering just a quantity, typically, of, reorder 500, reorder 1,000. This lot for lot works well, very well, with A and B items where you don't want a lot of inventory around. You kind of get a recommended order when you get a demand. And I have one company, or rather large company, that's all they use is lot for lot with safety stock. Any questions on lot for lot? Okay.
We do have one question, John.
Okay. And?
Does lot accumulation period look at sales orders?
Yes. Yes, everything in the planning worksheet looks at every sales order, every purchase order, inventory, production orders, assembly orders, and forecast. In your example, your question was, I have a sales order that is due April, I don't know, 7th. Planning will see it. We don't have enough inventory. It makes a recommendation, and it looks for other demand 7 days from that date. It could be another sales order, could be a forecast. It's looking for independent demand. Does that answer your question? That the answer is yes, absolutely. It's looking, in your example, it's just looking for, do I have another sales order? Keep it simple. That is within those 7 days. If I do, I'm going to combine them onto one line in the planning worksheet to say we need to order 10 because there were 2 on one and 8 on the other sales order. 2 different due dates, but they're within 7 days of each other. Same product. Let's say they ordered the same product. Are we good with that?
I believe so. I'll let you know if another question comes through on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. Yeah, okay. Because again, this whatever it's fair game. Any questions? Because well, I don't. This is what I would call 101, just exposure to what NAV can do, and everybody's a little bit different. So if I keep going here, fourth reorder policy is order. This one, you can read this, but it creates a reservation. So I have a sales order item. We never have it in inventory. Let's say it's make to order or assemble to order. Well, not assemble order, sorry. It's a make to order production order item. And I set it up as order. Planning will pull it into the planning worksheet, and it will not combine other orders for that same item together with it. And when I generate the production order, there'll be a reservation between the production order and the sales order. So order policy, let me show you the screen. That might help with, not a whole lot is set up here. As you see, most of this is grayed out. Basically the safety lead time, it does not include inventory. I could have 500 of these sitting on the shelf, and if there's a sales order and it's set up as order, it will suggest a new order, and if I created it, it will be reserved to the sales order line. So this policy could be used instead of, I'll just throw this instead of, we have customers who create sales orders, create production orders off of sales orders. So they enter a sales order, they go up to planning, they'll create the production order. And there's a reservation there. If you didn't want to do that, if there was not a reason to do that, typically the reason you do that is because you might have a configured product, and then it's creating a bill and a route on the fly, and when I create the production order, it generates the correct bill and route based on the configurator options. If I don't have that situation, but I still want to link one production order to one sales orders, I do not have to create it off the sales order. I can let planning run, pull it into the planning worksheet, and when I create it off the planning worksheet, it will create the production order and have that reservation. So I can take that responsibility off of the CSR, the sales entry person, and put it where it probably really belongs, is with the planner. When he sees it in the planning worksheet, he may adjust dates, he may change the routing, he may change something on it before he creates the production order. So order has its place, depending on what your process is. Any questions on that, guy? Just look here once. Where am I at here? Okay, so we went through the 4 reorder policies pretty quick, but you have fixed reorder. I'm going to say recommend that for C items. It's based on a reorder point and a reorder multiple or reorder quantity. We have this order, which is a 1-for-1 reservation, typically on a finished item where you never have it. I suppose it could be on a purchase part. Maybe it's a motor that you're buying, a service part that you have to order, that you want to reserve that PO line for that sales order. That way. We have maximum, which I see used mostly in managing subcontractor type inventories, but it can be used also for remote locations that are maybe replenished from the parent company location. It's one way to do it. And then we have the lot for lot, which is, I recommend that for A and B type expensive items where you don't want to have that inventory sitting around. But again, it depends on your process. If you have long lead time items and your sales process is you want to turn stuff in, let's say 3 days or something, then you're forced to carry some of that inventory. But Those are the four, and then the fifth was the blank, which I've only seen really used for long lead time items or items you don't want to plan. And I guess if you had set up an inventory, I don't know if any of you are using service items. There's a ability in 2017, I think it is. You can have a service item, and you may not have a reorder policy on that either. Okay. The next part I'm going to go into, how are these, where are these used? So I've got 4 reorder policies. Let's say I went through, and how you get started, I would recommend you would set up just a few items, set up reorder policies, because when I run planning, it's only going to look if it has a reorder policy. Remember, if it's blank, it ignores it. That allows you to, in a test company, set up half a dozen items and start understanding what does planning do when I have test sales orders or information, rather than trying to do it on the whole table, because it may be that as you go through, you'll learn more about the reorder policies, and rather than having updated them all at once, you can do a handful and get comfortable with how it's working. Okay, so the reorder policies, where are they used? There are 3 ways to run planning in NAV. Purchasing has the requisition worksheet. You can run that. I'll talk about that in a minute, what it does and what it doesn't do. It's probably the most important thing, what it doesn't do. The first level, there's 2 levels of manufacturing license, and the first level, you do get assembly orders, and there's an assembly planning worksheet, which is, to me, is identical to the manufacturing one, but you have ability to plan. In other words, it would tell you that you need to create assembly work orders in addition to purchase parts. And then the last one is the manufacturing, which is full blown, it's got assembly orders, production orders, and purchase orders ability to generate the requirements. So 3 different worksheets. These last 2 are pretty much the same, but a lot of people on rec worksheet, but I'll show you the gap there if you're using assembly orders or manufacturing, what it doesn't do there. Okay, so let's have at that. So requisition worksheet. This calculates a replenishment for purchased or transfer items only. So if you're new and you're running assembly orders, they will not show up in your requisition worksheet. And also, if you have, we'll keep it simple, you have an assembly order item on a sales order line, and I run the requisition worksheet, it's going to not include that item or any of the components on that because I haven't created the assembly order yet. Let's say we haven't created it yet. If I've created the assembly orders ahead of time, then those would be available to show on a rec worksheet. So again, it comes down to your process. If you could get away with just using the rec worksheet, or do you need to run the planning worksheet if you have assembly orders only? If we go to assembly planning worksheet, which is pretty much like the manufacturing one, it will actually show you all 4 of these because I think it's the same worksheet. You will have purchase orders, transfer orders, assembly orders, and if you have the advanced NAV module, you would get prod orders in there also. And this is the one, as soon as, if you only have purchasing and assembly orders and transfer, but no prod, this is what I recommend you run, because you do want to explode any assembly orders for the purchase parts to get that information to purchasing, even if you have not created the purchase order or production assembly order yet. In other words, I've got an assembly item on a sales order. I haven't created it yet because it's assembled to stock type item. And now it's telling me I want to, the rec worksheet will not have assembly component demand available for you to see. And then the last one is the manufacturing planning worksheet. So it does have it's identical to the assembly, but because you're running full-blown manufacturing, you would run it in the planning or manufacturing side of the world. So those are the three opportunities to run. Okay, I think I'm going to take a little break from this stuff. Ask, is there any questions on kind of what we went through, the 4 reorder policies and where they're used? And then I'm always boring, but I usually like to, I can't see anybody, but have a little fun with the group. I've got a trivia question for the group, and we're giving away a $10 Amazon gift card. So you can, if you're not paying attention, time to pay attention. So I'll ask this first question, and if I don't get an answer, then I'll change it. I'll word it for the purchasing. I'm the purchaser. I'm in charge of buying things. And sales comes in and tells me, well, no, we'll keep it more simple than that. I have a planning worksheet line, a requisition line that says to order 10 of something by end of next week. I check it all out. The vendor has a deal going, or if I buy a dozen, I get a better price, or I buy 20. He has a something that, you know what, we use those a lot. I know that. I'm the purchasing guy. I know we'll use those up. I'm going to buy those. So I change the quantity from 10 to 20 and create the purchase order. I think that's typical activity that might happen because I can get a better price and I know we use them, so we'll go with that. However, the next night or next day planning runs and it will tell me to change quantity back to 10 because I do not have a demand in the system for those additional 10, correct? I mean, that's something I came up with, special one time this month deal from the vendor. How would I prevent NAV from telling me that message the next night? Anybody out there know?
Okay, John.
Yeah.
We have one person saying to change your max quantity.
Potentially you could do that. I'm saying that I don't really want to mess with my parameters, though. I'm at my setups because this is a one-time deal. So I don't want to change any setup because next month it's gone. That deal's not there. You could, if it was max quantity, you're correct. I could change it and add 10 more, and then it would order back up to that. That would work, but that's maintenance, and I'm not a fan of maintenance. Anybody else?
Yes. How about on your purchase order, there is a box that you can click that overrides this, correct?
Well, you can order more than planning asks at any time, but there isn't a checkbox as such unless you had a modification. Anybody else? I'm gonna go. The next screen is gonna show you how to do that, and this is without a modification, and this is reality. This is what really happens. So I'm gonna go to it, and we'll go back, circle back to the I think we'll award the gift card to the person who, yes, you could go into the maximum quantity and increase it by 10 to eliminate the message the next night, but you know, that's a lot of maintenance, and I'm the purchasing guy and I don't like to do that kind of stuff. But you're thinking that would work, but it's much more straightforward than that. There's a field on the purchase order called planning flexibility, which may or may not be showing. It's in almost every version, and also on the production order. And by default, NAV out of the box will go unlimited, meaning unlimited means planning will tell me to reduce it by 10. The other choice is none, meaning I don't want planning the next night to say reduce it by 10 because I know what I'm doing. I'm gonna, and that works fine. You can change on the planning worksheet. I could actually change this field to none, create the PO, and planning the next night will not tell me to reduce it by 10. Now the gotcha there is you have to be careful is if I receive more than I need before I need it, that's not a problem because I'm in charge of that. I know that. What I don't want to do is have that order move in, the sales order, let's say, moves in by 10 days. I've got none sitting on my planning flexibility, so it's going to tell me to create a new purchase order because it will not move this, change it, do anything with this PO line. It'll leave it due on a certain date. So planning flexibility is very powerful, but as the planner, either purchasing or manufacturing, just be aware, it's something you have to manage, but it does have its use. With that said, I think somebody was being creative with the maximum, changing that, and if we could get Angie, if you could get their name, we'll email them a gift card for $10. How's that? Does that work?
That works perfectly, John.
Okay. So I'm going to describe the same field for manufacturing. Those of you that get involved with manufacturing, I like this field for manufacturing if my manufacturing is a process where, let's see, today's Thursday, I'm the planner, I'm possibly working on Tuesday's orders the next week, or even maybe even Monday. I have some customers who will, I'm the planner, my orders are all firm planned, they're production orders. When I release them, I change the planning flexibility to none if it's going to run on Monday, because I want a solid schedule. I don't want planning to tell me to move anything, change anything. We're running that Monday. It's a very tight window for production. I usually like to, I can say most companies, they're flexible. I like to be flexible, but as a planner, I'd like to maybe on 1 or 2 days are locked in, and beyond that, it's still unlimited. But when I'm ready to run it on Monday, I would change it to planning flexibility none, because I don't want the planning worksheet Friday night come in Monday and it says to move it or change it or cancel it or change, because I'm on top of that. So that's another use for that planning flexibility on the production side. Probably less of a use, but locking in 1 day or 2, some companies can do that, others can't do that, but for some it does work. So,
hey, John?
Yep.
We do have another question.
Sure.
Not sure if this was answered in your explanation here. So can you change this, say if you have a new order that comes through and you want it to recalculate?
Yes. It's on the line. It's just a field on the PO line or the production line. And if you expose it, you can change it. So you do have ability, like I said, if you're on, and I think that's a great example, is planning worksheet said I ordered 20 instead of 10, correct? So I changed my planning flexibility to none because I don't want the planning worksheet the next night to say, oh, reduce it by 10. But then I'm looking at the schedule and some orders got moved, so I need to reopen that up. I can go in and just change it to unlimited, and the planning at night will see it and potentially tell me to reduce it by 10 or increase it or move the date, those kind of things. But the purchasing side in particular works well if you're receiving the material before you need it. I can ramp up the quantity, change it to none, life is good. If I have a volatile process where that keeps, changing on me, locking that, then I have to figure out how do I manage that. Obviously, I would see a new PO recommended in my planning worksheet or requisition worksheet for that same item, and I would know I could go and see, wait, I got a PO that that's coming in like in 2 days from now that would cover it, but it said a new one, whatever, you could see that. I mean, as a planner, I would know what POs I have out there for that item. When I'm going to the why, and I'll go through that in a minute, of this thing is telling me all this data. Why is it telling me? I'll give you 3 ways to look at it. So planning flexibility, good field, but you have to be a little bit careful with it. Okay, we'll keep going here. I'm going to talk about a few advanced features for the planner. Production guys, people, gals, whatever. I'm in the planning worksheet. This is an example. It wants me to build something here, and you can expose the routing and production BOM on the planning worksheet, meaning I could change this right now. And I don't see in the BOMs a whole lot, although it does, some companies do, but the routing might be, this might be a line, and I'm the planner, and when I launch this, you know, we were gonna run it on this, using this routing, but I'm gonna run it on a smaller line, so I'm changing the routing number to 1201, for instance. I can do it right on the planning worksheet before I create the production order. There's a refresh button on it. We won't get into how you do that, but just be aware you can. You can change the route or the BOM on the planning worksheet before I create the production order. I can also delete items or override work centers or machines before I create the production order. So I don't have to create it and then go maintenance. I can do it up front. It's just a flexibility thing it allows. In the interest of time, we'll keep pushing ahead here. And again, when I refresh the production order, these 3 fields here determine how I do that. If I've got a different bill or a route from the main one, I would not want to check lines. Lines means go out to the item card and get the default bill and routing and build it. So if I had my own, if I uncheck this first one, it would use the routing and component referenced on the item itself on the production order. So if overrode it, I want to keep that. So just be aware, alternate bills and routings, how you manage that as a planner. Here I'm on the planning worksheet, and I can see the bill and the route that it brought in, and I could actually change these before I create the production order. So a little bit on I'm the planner for production options. Okay, I'm going to get into this planning worksheet. So this is a planning worksheet. I'm getting into why. Why is it telling me to order something? That's probably the first. I don't know. As a planner, okay, it's telling me that I need to order so many. I don't have the quantity showing here, but why is it telling me to do it? First option is check this order tracking on the ribbon, and that button will show you that it's ordering 36. I think that's my order multiple. 22 are available for other orders, but I have a sales order due for 14. So that's why it's telling me to order it. So order tracking, that'd be the first thing as a planner. Highlight your line, go up to order tracking. Okay, I got it. Says we've got a sales order. Makes sense. Okay, a second way, if that's clear as mud, off the ribbon, you can do item availability by event. And if I show you, I'll show you this. So I'm on a requisition or I think it's on a worksheet planning. Item availability by event is like a pegging report if you've worked on other ERP systems. So it's date sensitive. So it starts with the date, how many on hand. It shows you what's being issued, and I can run this with planning or without planning lines. That may help you figure out why is it telling me to order something. And then the third option, if that all fails, there is a report, which is a decent report. If you have SKU cards, we usually have the developer, do it by SKU location, but if you don't, this is pretty good. So I ran it for this item, this front wheel. I have 152 on inventory when I ran the report, okay? And then I have firm planned order, released production order, another firm planned order, and it does a projected balance as it's scrolling up and down. So you get a dates and what type of demand. Is it from the planning worksheet? Is it from a released order? Is it from a firmed order? Is it from a sales order? That will show you, and it'll give you the document number. So sometimes this is the the final resort is, man, I still don't get why it's telling me to order it. Okay, now I got it. I can see that. That would tell you on here also would be your worksheet order if it was in there as a supply was coming in. So 3 different places to look for that. So I've got these are all good for the planner. Let me just back here. So order tracking off the ribbon is good. Item availability by event. And then the report called planning availability. And this report sometimes we move to the worksheet for the planner. I like planners to work off of one spot, one-stop shopping. I don't necessarily want them navigating all over the place. So those are 3 key. Why is it telling me to order type available things on the system that might help you figure out. And then of course the planning worksheet is all about, once I figure out, let me get to that screen. Once I figure out I need to order it, I accept the action message and then carry it out, and it creates the PO or the assembly order or the transfer order or the production order for me. At that same time, I have ability to change dates on here. I don't have quantities showing here, but quantities could be changed. I could delete it. It might come back tomorrow night, but I don't care. I'm not going to do anything today. And I recommend always creating production orders as firm planned. That's a whole nother discussion, but how the planner then manages firm plan production orders is a process in order to release them. Purchase orders get created as open, so you still have that ability to go in there and filter to your open POs and potentially change something there before you would send out the email purchase order to a vendor. And I think we're at the point where, let me keep going here. And I think we're on track. I wanted to try and get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So we did a whirlwind flip through reorder policies, some planner fields, tips, and then basically working with the planning worksheet of why is it telling me to order something, what are some of the ways to dig in. And my recommendation to get started is, if you haven't started, test company obviously, and set up a dozen items and work with those and get comfortable with what it's telling you and why it's telling you. Because once you hit that button to calculate the planning worksheet for everything, it can get overwhelming. There are, they call it noise, a lot of like change quantity. For instance, if I ordered 100 and my sales order changed to 98, am I going to go change my purchase order to 98? There are ability to handle that kind of, so you don't get that in your planning worksheet. But those are kind of you get comfortable with what it does out of the box, and then those are the fine-tuning buffer things that you can do, whether it's quantity or a timing buffer. Another example of that is my PO schedule to come in today or yesterday, it didn't come in. Do I want a message on that, or do I have a buffer of like 2 days? If it doesn't come within 2 days, don't show it in the planning worksheet as a problem. Give me a couple days yet on top of that. Dates are another whole animal that is a whole nother session on dates, which is good. A lot of customers are trying to understand all the, NAV has a bazillion dates and how they all fit together. And if your dates are not accurate, your planning is not accurate. So really, dates are very, very important. So with that, any questions? I mean, anything's fair game.
First one is, how do the damper and safety stock fields affect things on your worksheet?
Okay, let's talk about the safety stock first. Safety stock definition is the amount of inventory I need on hand within my vendor lead time to cover demand. So it's not intended to be like we always want to have 100 on hand. It's intended to be a field that is, we use, I don't know, let's see, we can get this part in 7 days from the vendor. We always want to at least have a dozen on hand. That would be a good use for that. Safety stock on the planning worksheet will be an emergency order. There is, it will tell you, it'll say, let's say your safety stock was 10. Through the planning, you run planning, and on next week Friday, you're going to be down to, it's an emergency, you're below, you're at 9. It's going to tell you to order 1, and if you got a 7-day lead time, it will be an emergency order, and it doesn't know what to do. But so you would have to, as a purchasing person, handle that. So safety stock does work, and it's emergency order typically to get your inventory up to that level. There is a new parameter. Well, maybe it's not even new anymore. But when you run the planning worksheet, it says respect planning parameters, and you want to mark that because when safety stock runs, you want it to respect the order multiple or the minimum order or that. If you don't mark that, it's going to just say order 1, for instance. So safety stock does work. I'd encourage you to work in a test company again and go from there. And then the buffers, like I said, there's 2 buffers that are available. One has to do with time. My example was we planned receipt date for this item was Tuesday. Was Tuesday this week. Do we have a buffer of 2 days? If it's not here yet, do I want planning to get all excited and have a message about that? Or, but I encourage you to use those buffers once you got your arms around how planning works and you got it set up and you're comfortable with what it's telling you. Then I would start working with those buffers. And the other is there's a quantity buffer, and if you read the definition of it, it has to do with your lot size. What it's trying to do is a cut down on the messages where planning you order 100. I've cut the PO for 100, but somebody changes a sales order to 99, for instance. Do you want a message to reduce your PO by 1? Those kind of messages. So I would hold off on some of those using those type fields until the damper period. I should say the damper period and damper quantity until you've got your arms around some of the other stuff. But it does work. Any other questions?
Yes. How does forecasting interact with the requisition worksheet?
Okay. Requisition worksheet is dealing with purchase and transfer items, correct? If I have a forecast for either sales or components, purchased items, it does interact, but it nets out. So let's say that next week I forecast, and I usually recommend forecast by weeks. The reason being is you don't want, because forecasting is consumed by what you actually sold. So if I'm a distributor and let's say I forecast 100 of item A next week, but I've got sales orders coming in next week for 50 that I need to satisfy, that 50 come off of the 100, so I'm only going to plan for 100 total, not 150. So it consumes the forecast. That's why I usually recommend your forecast typically is for the month, but load it in the NAV by week, because if you have a huge week for an item, then your forecast is totally gone, and you might want, instead of 100, you might want 25, 25, 25, 25 week by week, so that if I get that big spike order early in the week, the next week isn't affected. I still plan on that. Something to consider. I like to see a weekly forecast, not a monthly, because of that. But it's a net effect. Think of it that way. Actual sales orders will consume the forecast. And my example, if the forecast was 100 and I had sales orders for 150, I would not have planning tell me I need 250. It would just need 150. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Any other questions? When's spring coming? Any questions like that?
Spring is almost here. It's getting warmer and warmer each day. No, there are no more questions.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the questions. Yeah, because I think other users like to hear those. And again, this was kind of a beginner's, but I'm sure some of you are running planning already, and just maybe a refresher. Like I said, I'm a big fan of lot for A and B items, type items, and fixed reorder for C type items, and maximum for subcontractor inventories. So we got pretty much on schedule. Hopefully everybody got something out of this, I hope. And that's all I have, Angie.
Okay, thank you, John,
for Thursday.
all of the information that you presented to us. And we will get the gift card out to the winner. So congratulations. And I just want to let you guys know about our events that are always being updated on our website. Oh, we have one quick question.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it. One of the attendees said that it was a great class. So we thank you for that.
That's the one I paid $50 to. So thank you for I paid for that one. So anyway.
Thank you everyone for attending, and we just want to encourage you to visit our website to check out all of our events. We are changing those just about every week. We have something that is added, whether it be a webinar coming up, or we're changing some scheduling events. So check that out and register for any webinars that you would be interested in. We're taking a break next week, and then we will return on April 5th. We will have NAV Payroll. They will be presenting on Payday Should Be Painless. So if you're interested in that, yeah, if you're interested in that, please register. And then we have our customer conference, which is a free event for you to attend. And if you haven't been, you will be able to meet John. He will be presenting.
They might not want to come then.
Yes, they will. He will be presenting at our conference, and you can register for one of his breakout sessions. And again, this is recorded, so it will be available later this week for you to review again or to share with any of your colleagues. And we would like to see you on one of our next webinars. So thank you again, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Sure. Bye.